Let's go back to page 15 in our booklet, and let's go back to chapter 5, 2 Samuel. At this point in our study, David is now what? King. He's now king. And we have at least one indicator here of a timeline. Because we talked about in the beginning, when David was anointed, then he kills Goliath, and then Saul seeks his life, and on it goes. We did not know exactly how old David was when he either killed Goliath or when he was anointed. We don't really know. We surmised some things. We guessed. And some said, well, probably 20. Some said, no, he was probably a teenager. Others said, well, because he wasn't in the military service, his brothers were. He was not in military service, so he was at 25. Isn't that what we said, Frank? At 25, they actually fought?
20.
At 20. Okay, so we said he's not 20 yet because he wasn't with his brothers when they were fighting the Philistines. We don't know David's age, but we know how old he is right now in our study, because he began to reign over Judah when he was 30 years old. So from 30 years old backwards in our study, how long has it been? We don't know. 10 years, 12 years, maybe 15 years of time has elapsed since David was anointed. And remember, when he was anointed, few people knew it. But at some point, Saul knew it. And as David became famous, everybody began to know that he was special. He was so special in so many ways. And we've talked about his polygamy and how God, for whatever reason, tolerated his polygamy. But David hasn't made mistakes. Saul made mistakes. Saul had an opportunity after God condemned him and said the kingdom's going to be taken from you and given to another. Saul could have ended his reign on a positive note. He could have trusted God and said, okay, I have disobeyed God. I'm sorry, I understand. And Saul could have ended his reign. The transition to David could have been positive. But instead, because God instilled this punishment on him, this distressing spirit, he sought to kill David. And why didn't David fight back?
Saul was anointed by God.
He was anointed by God, and he had great respect for that. And in David's own words, he said, God will take care of Saul in due time. He'll either die in battle or God will take him. That's not my task to take care of Saul. And so that's where we've been studying. And now we know how old David is. At this point in our study, he's 30 years old. And he's going to live to be 70 years old. He's going to reign 40 years. So that's a little bit of a timeline we know there. We also know that there is a world of stuff that has happened that we don't have a clue about. And that's the way it is with history, and that's the way it is with the Bible. And I'm reminded of what John wrote in the last verse of the Gospel of John. And I was reminded of that in thinking about all the things David did that we don't know, because 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, whatever the timeline was, we only know a little bit. We only know the highlights. But John wrote that many other things did Jesus do that aren't written in this book. He was referring to probably his Gospel of John. And there are a few other things maybe mentioned in the other three Gospels that John didn't record, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about, in general, this is just a small picture of Jesus. Many other things he did. And he even used a hyperbole. He said, if everything was written that Jesus did, the world probably couldn't contain the books that should be written. That was a hyperbole to say, we just have a snippet. And that's interesting. We only have a snippet of David's life here. But as it develops, more and more people knew David. They knew of his leadership skills. They knew that he was a godly man. They understood he wasn't making mistakes. Now, the one thing that we can't call it a mistake because God sanctioned it, but David was very violent. He was aggressive. A lot of people were killed. They were all enemies of Israel. We talked about this last time. The other verse that I'm reminded of, and this is one of my favorite sayings in all the Bible, when Paul was on trial for his life, the latter part of the book of Acts, and you recall the story, he goes before Felix and Festus and Agrippa, and he makes his defense. He recounts his conversion on the road to Damascus 3 times to these people. And along the way, he appeals to Caesar, and that's how he got to Rome. That was all God's plan because God had told him. And I'm talking too much now about all this, but the verse that I really like is when Paul is defending himself before Agrippa. Agrippa was a Jew. He wasn't a good Jew. He wasn't a good Jew. His father had killed James with the sword. His father died making a great oration and not giving God any credit for it whatsoever. And he killed him. God took him. Herod Agrippa was a Jew who knew the Jews. He knew their customs. And that's why Paul said, I'm very thankful, King Agrippa, that I can share these things with you because you understand. And then he said, before he got to the point where he said, I know, do you believe the prophets? I know that you believe the prophets. And that's when Agrippa said, you almost persuade me to what? To be a Christian. But before that, when Paul is telling him this, and I'll get to the point here, why I'm reminded of this verse. He said, King Agrippa, well, first Festus interrupted him and said, much learning has made you crazy. Much learning has made you mad. And he looked at him, Paul said, well, I'm not mad, most noble Festus. I only speak the things that I know are the truth. But anyway, we come to the point where he is teaching Agrippa, and he said, I know that you know all these things about Jesus, the crucifixion, about Jesus' ministry. I know that you know all things because this thing wasn't done what?
In private.
It wasn't done
In private?
It was not done in private. He used another expression. What? That's close. That's close. This thing wasn't done in a corner. I love that. Paul said, surely you know, Agrippa, this thing wasn't done in a corner. Jesus didn't live privately. He didn't live in a corner. David didn't live in a corner. And we only know a little bit of the life of David. There's great things we don't know. But we know at this point in our lesson, he's king. He's finally king, and he's only 30 years old. But we know that Abner said, no, we're going to have a king over Israel. And who did he select to be Israel's king? A son of Saul named what? Ishbosheth. He only reigned 2 years. And he was murdered by his own people because they thought David would like that. And David had them executed. And he said, how dare you? And he even called Ishbosheth innocent. And he even called him a righteous man. He even bragged on Abner, who had fought against him for years. And Joab kills Abner. And David's upset with Joab. And he makes great lamentation over Abner. That's all just a quick summary of where we are now. David's 30 years old. He begins his reign only in Judah. Ishbosheth only reigned 2 years. There's 5.5 more years of civil war. We don't read much about it. 5.5 more years because David reigned in Judah 7.5 years. He reigned over all Israel 40 years. But only united Israel and Judah 33.5 years, you see. So there's another gap here. There's a gap of about 5.5 years, which we're reading very little here about what happened. But now he's king over all Israel. But there's a couple things I wanted us to note on page 15 before we press on. Look at item number 5 on page 15. We see David crowned king over all Israel at Hebron, 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. And we probably covered this, but Jerusalem was not numbered with the cities of Israel. The Jebusites controlled Jerusalem. So the next thing David did is he conquered Jerusalem from the Jebusites. And he knew that Jerusalem would be a special place. It was located in a special place. It was very highly defensible. And it was strategically located. And so David chose Jerusalem to be a very special place. Now in the old, if you go back hundreds of years, the name for Jerusalem was what? Salem. Salem. And now we know it as Jerusalem. The Jebusites are driven out of Jerusalem. And David conquers it. So let's look at the fill in the blank there, number 6. David conquered Jerusalem from the Jebusites. Jerusalem was also called what? Zion. And the city of David became known as the city of David. It became the special place. It became the place where David wanted the Ark of the Covenant. And all the items in the most holy place, he wanted them brought to Jerusalem because they had been out of place for a long time. So David's trying to put things in order here. And at the end of chapter 5, and before we get into today's lesson, there's more battles to be fought. With what group of people? The Philistines. It goes on and on and on. 2 more great battles, but they're not defeated. We're going to study, Lord willing, in future lessons. The Philistines aren't gone. They aren't conquered. They're still there. But these 2 great battles happen at the end of chapter 5. And they're defeated. And God assists in the defeat. They had one great battle in the valley of Rephaim, and that's right close to Jerusalem. That's a suburb of Jerusalem today. You can go walk the suburbs, the streets there, and know that this great battle was fought right there in the suburbs of Jerusalem. The second battle, though, God got more involved. In the second battle, God said, don't face them head on. Circle around behind them. And I'm going to tell you what to do. Circle around behind them and wait until you hear something. And what were they to wait to hear? The sound of marching where? In the mulberry trees. Isn't that special? Wait till you hear the sound of marching, which is going to be amplified in the mulberry trees. And when you hear that, go forward. And they did. And so God was involved in a very special, very unique way in that battle. Which brings me to the discussion of mulberry trees. Have you ever seen one? I asked Doug because he's an outdoorsman. Coy, have you ever seen a mulberry tree?
Got a great big one that's about 2/3 dead in my yard.
All right. A great big one about 2/3 dead. Mulberry trees exist in the southeastern United States. They are not as common as oak and hickory and maple. Have you ever seen one? Raise your hand if you've ever seen a mulberry tree. Okay, good. They're out there. West Tennessee has more mulberry trees than the plateau. We don't have pecan trees up here. And that's heartbreaking to me because West Tennessee has pecan trees everywhere. They're in old home places, they're on golf courses, they're in schoolyards. There's anybody that wants fresh pecans in West Tennessee, if you'll just go get them, there's places where you can go and pick them up by the grocery sack full. And I love fresh pecans. They don't exist on the plateau. I don't know why. Walnuts do. We got lots of walnuts, but no pecans. But there are mulberry trees here. Now the mulberry tree is a special tree. It grows large. It has a beautiful, delicious fruit on it. So my next question, have you ever eaten mulberries? One? Anyone else ever tasted a mulberry? You got a tree in your yard. Have you ever tasted the fruit?
I Oh, it used to. Don't
Yeah.
have them anymore, but it used to have them, yeah. Birds could make a mess after they had them.
The birds love the mulberries. They look like blackberries, only they're longer. They're about 3/4 of an inch long. They look just like a blackberry. The seeds are slightly smaller and they taste wonderful. Very, very sweet fruit. So some of you that don't know what mulberry trees are, they're still out there. They're rare. Not really sure why they're rare. They're rare in West Tennessee. But I want to tell you about one mulberry tree in West Tennessee. Before I tell you about that though, there's a unique characteristic of mulberries. The wood is beautiful. And it was used a lot in the old days to make dough bowls. You know, the antique dough bowls that you buy for $40 to $50 at yard sales. Do you buy and sell dough bowls? You buy and sell everything else. You don't buy dough bowls. Okay. So you know it's kind of a light colored wood and it's easy to turn into a bowl. It's also rot resistant. Very rot resistant, even more than a cypress tree. I got to stop talking about mulberry trees and go ahead, but in the field, if you don't totally get a mulberry stump out, you'll wish you had, because it won't rot. And you'll hang your plow on it. And when you do, the tractor's going to stop. And it's going to turn sideways, and you're going to have a crick in your neck for about 2 weeks. We had 2. And we never dug them up and tried to dynamite them out. But my father said, you know where it is. So pick your plows up when you go through there, because if you hit it, you're going to shear some pins and we're going to lose a half a day fixing plows. That's the other thing about mulberry trees. But what I really wanted to tell you is my brother and I ate our fill of mulberries one morning while my father was planting soybeans, and we were keeping seed and fertilizer in the back of a pickup truck. And we found ourselves parked under a giant mulberry tree, which was just full of mulberries. Ripe mulberries, late May, early June. Now, I've never turned away from wild fruit. I'll eat anything. Plums, muscadines, anything I can get my hands on. I just love wild fruit. So Danny and I just filled up on mulberries. And then I looked at one a little more closely. It was full of little black bugs. I said, look. He said, that's just one. I said, okay. I started looking. Every mulberry I picked was full of little black bugs. And I had eaten hundreds of mulberries that day. And I lived.
It tastes so good.
That's why it tastes. And I lived through that. So that's the story about mulberries. Let's go to page 16. Page 16. Lesson 8 is a homecoming heart. Why is this lesson called a homecoming heart? What's coming home? The Ark of the Covenant. David says we're going to bring it to Jerusalem. And the Bible doesn't specifically refer to all the other articles that were in the most holy place. The utensils, the table, golden covered table for the showbread. The candlesticks. You know, this was a special thing. And they were going to move it to Jerusalem. So David takes 30,000 men with him. That's an army. They want to make sure they get the ark home. And apparently all the other articles that go with it. I have no reason to believe that they didn't also bring all the other articles that go in the most holy place. What was significant to the Jews about the ark? It's where God's presence was. Thank you, Elena. In the most holy place. The priest didn't get to go in there, only the high priest, and that only once a year. Now that doesn't mean God didn't exist wherever He needed to exist, but it meant that to them, the Ark of the Covenant between the cherubims was the seat of God. That's where God's presence was. So it was important for David to bring it to Jerusalem, which now is going to be a special place for the Jews. And so they retrieve it. And if you look at Numbers chapter 4, you can read 15 verses there about how they were to do this. And it was very detailed. When you move, what do you do to precious items? You wrap them up, don't you? You put blankets around them. Doug, what do you do to your favorite guns?
Well, no, but I thought it was whenever we ship something that's very breakable, we try our best to, because we know the post office, they're going to play kickball with it. But anyway, we try to protect it. Most of the time we're successful.
So the instructions in Numbers 4 were to cover everything with badger skins. And not only that, but to cover it with this beautiful, thick, fine blue cloth. And so they were instructed to cover everything, even the utensils. But the harshest instruction of all was not that you be sure you wrap it carefully. You be sure you protect it. You be sure you put the poles through the rings, but you don't what? You don't touch any of it because it's holy. You don't touch it. And verse 15 of Numbers 4 says, if you touch it, you will surely die. Surely die. So they leave. And they put the ark in a special brand new cart to carry it. It's a new cart, Doug.
I was just going to say, don't you know they went over this before they moved the thing?
Yes.
I'm sure they went over every step.
Yeah.
So ignorance is not you go ahead.
They knew it. And they knew that God wanted it done in a very special way. And they knew not to touch it. Okay, they knew that. And so they're on their way. A new cart, the Ark of the Covenant. That beautiful gold-covered Ark of the Covenant with the cherubims on the top, facing each other. And they're on their way. And as they go on their way, they're very happy. This is a happy time. And so they're playing music. And the Bible lists all these instruments, wooden instruments, harps, cymbals, and other instruments that we don't even know what they were exactly, but they were playing music. We've talked about music. It's a gift from God. It goes way back. And they were playing these instruments. They were happy. And they come to the threshing floor. What was the guy's name? Nacon, N-A-C-H-O-N. Thank you. Sometimes words just slip. Nacon's threshing floor. They come there. And the ox stumbled. And as the ox stumbled, the cart began to do this. And Uzzah and Ahio, his brother, the sons of Abinadab, let's back up. The ark was in Abinadab's home. And we would infer from that Abinadab was very high in the priesthood. At this point, he may have been dead. He may have already died because he's not mentioned in the transfer. But Uzzah and Ahio, his sons, are driving the cart. And as the ox stumbles, Uzzah's driving the cart and he reaches back and he does what? He touches it. Why did he do that? To steady it. What was in his heart?
Save the ark.
To save it from hitting the ground, being damaged. Maybe he was thinking, what if one of those cherubims breaks off? And so he reached back and he touched it with good intentions. With good intentions. His heart was right at this point. We have no reason to believe that he said, I'm going to break the commandment. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to touch it. So he did.
And it was a reflex.
A reflex action. Yeah. He did it. And what happened? He died instantly. God took him. How do we feel about that?
What do you think would have happened if he hadn't touched it, if it had fallen?
I think God would have protected it. But he didn't know that. So his reflex action, Beth, was do this.
So was it a lack of faith?
Wow, that's a good question. How do you feel about it, Scott? How do you feel about what happened here?
Well, I mean, he should have felt like that God would take care of it, wouldn't let it fall.
Yeah. Did he?
I don't understand the anger of God, God killing him.
David didn't understand it either. David got angry with God. Why would you do this? But remember, God said, you touch it, you will surely die. Uzzah made a mistake because he did not totally believe that if he touched it, he would die.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
The guy in the corner.
We had 2 or 3 comments here. 1, 2, 3. The guy in the corner.
Wouldn't that be more a lack of faith, not carrying it on the rings like they were supposed to?
There is the root of the problem. They
Yeah, they were
didn't
not
follow
carrying
directions correct from the beginning.
They made mistakes from the beginning. That's an excellent point. Thank you, Jake, for that, because had the poles been inserted properly and the thing been transported properly, the ox stumbling would not have really been a threat.
The ox wouldn't have had anything to do with it. But he, in essence, paid for the whole people's lack of
Following
following
directions.
directions.
Following directions, 1. Trusting God, 2. Having faith in God, 3. Yes, it's sad. Do we understand David's anger? David was so excited to be taking the ark home. He was so excited. They were all happy. They were playing music. They were excited. And then this happens. David was angry.
I don't think it had anything to do with it. It displeased God. I think it was an example. You do what I tell you to do. It has nothing to do with the fact that it was fair or not fair. And it wasn't a reaction. It's God was He's telling us,
Yes.
do what the Bible says.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're gonna what?
You're going to surely die.
Surely die. You're going to hell. That's what the whole story.
What did Nadab and Abihu do? Why did they offer the strange fire?
It was convenient.
They thought, well, we've got fire here. This is good fire. Why can't we just use this fire? They substituted the fire. I'm going to get to you. They substituted the fire. Nadab and Abihu thought they could do it their way. And what happened to Nadab and Abihu? They died. Ananias and Sapphira lied. And it put the fear in the church when God killed them because they openly lied and they held back. They didn't have to give any specific amount, but they said they gave it all. And that was a lie. And they were killed. These things are harsh, but God is always what? He's always just. He is always right. Okay, Garrett.
All of these examples, and then even going back to Adam and Eve, they're all where God has installed His plan, all the way up through Ananias and Sapphira. And the point of it is, do what I say, or there are consequences.
Absolutely.
And God, He's just. He cannot say, "Oh, he had good intent, so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do what I said." He has to do what He said.
It's a good point because the law, because God's rule is you will surely die. Someone else had a comment.
He covered it.
Okay. Yes.
Even, I mean, Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, look at what's still happening because of that.
Yes. Yes. And it was a mistake.
But
To
they
do-
took matters
Into their own
took
hands.
matters into
I
their
can't have a child even though God promised I'm going to. I'm old. I'm not going to have a child. Take Hagar.
Yeah.
And he did, lack of faith. Good point. So in all of this, what we're saying is Uzzah messed up. And Uzzah died as he should have.
Well, he died because David messed up.
Yes,
He
David.
carried that ark for decades
Yeah.
the way they were supposed to.
Yes.
Okay. And David killed people for killing the anointed of God because he needed to.
Yeah.
So why in the world didn't they carry the ark like they were supposed to?
It gets back to Jake's point.
You got 7 minutes.
And it's his fault.
What kind of clock do you have? Okay, so David is angry with God. David is also afraid of God. David is saying, I don't want anything else to do with this. And so they take the ark and put it in another home for 3 months. The home of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Now there's an interesting story. He wasn't even an Israelite. He was a Gittite. Goliath was a Gittite. Okay, these were people from Gath. Obed-Edom was a Gittite. We're also told later that Obed-Edom was a Levite and that he played the harp. Now, while the ark was, and by the way, that probably means that he married into the Levites. I'm not sure about that, why he's called a Levite, but he was a Gittite. He was a foreigner. But they took the ark, probably out of convenience, into his home. David said, we're not going to take it to Jerusalem. David was angry. David was afraid of God. So what happened to Obed-Edom, what happened to him as he had the ark, and I guess all the other accompaniments with it in his home? He was blessed. Somebody looks at David and says, well, it's been 3 months and they've had nothing but good things happen in that house. So, David takes it to Jerusalem. And when they get to Jerusalem, as they near Jerusalem, they are so happy. 30,000 people are singing and dancing and jumping. They're excited because they're bringing the ark of God home to Jerusalem, to a special place. But Michal didn't like that. One of David's wives, the first wife that was taken from him and then gotten back, she said, this is not good what you've done. She condemned David for dancing. She said, you've uncovered yourself. I guess that means he took off his outer garments as he was dancing and singing. You've uncovered yourself in front of all these maidservants. She was not happy, but David was happy. She was insensitive to David's happiness.
She was jealous.
She was jealous also because of her background. She was jealous. She was Saul's daughter. David said, I didn't dance for the maidservants. I didn't dance and sing for the people. I did it for what? I did it for God. I did it for God. And you know, she was being insensitive to his happiness in doing what he had done. There was nothing sinful about what he did. There was nothing sinful about what the whole multitude did. They were happy. They were celebrating. They were singing. They were dancing. David was probably right in the thick of it. And she is saying, you're the king. You've lowered yourself. You've uncovered yourself in front of the maidservants. And he said, no, that's not what I did. She was punished. Of all of his wives, he's going to have more, by the way. And he's going to have concubines. How many children did Michal have? 0. She never had a baby. It probably means that her relationship with David that day pretty much ended. She was never to give birth to a son or a daughter of the king. And so that ends chapter 6. Yes, sir.
And also assured the end of Saul's line.
Yes.
Because her child would have been his.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Ishbosheth is gone. By the way, this name Abinadab, it's a very common name. One of David's brothers, the second oldest son of Jesse, his name was Abinadab. It was a very common name. One of Saul's sons' name was Abinadab. Abinadab and Jonathan and Saul all died at the same time in battle. So it's a very common name. We don't know a great deal about Abinadab and the ark and all that goes on there. The next lesson, we're going to study how David decided God needed a what? A house. David had a house, a fine house, because the king of Tyre recognized him as an international figure, and he built him this great house. David said, I got a house. But the ark of God is in a tent. So David goes to Nathan and says, I want to build God a house. And Nathan said, okay, that sounds good. Make your plans. And David did begin to make plans. He began to import all these materials. But that wasn't what God wanted. So Lord willing, we'll begin next week by what God said. Who told you to build me a house? I haven't had a house. I don't need a house. That's what God said. Who told you to do that? And we'll talk more about that next time.